Hi guys, it's me, ColorMeCassie, and today we're going to be talking about dupes for the Naked 3 palette. So guys, the Naked 3 palette was actually one of the first makeup palettes that I owned. I think I might have had like one or two drugstore shadows before, but this was definitely my first major makeup purchase. And I've always thought that the blushed colors in this palette were really, really pretty. The other day, I got a couple different makeup palettes that are pretty close dupes for this, and I just kind of wanted to show you guys and compare and, you know, let you guys make a decision based off of that. The first palette that I think is pretty close to a dupe of this palette is the Pure Cosmetics Buff Collection eyeshadow palette, and this is just what this one looks like. If we compare the two, they're really, really eerily similar. Like on top, that is my Naked 3, and on bottom, that is my Pure Cosmetics, and they just look like mirror images of themselves right now. Like, that is crazy how similar they look, all the colors. I'm having trouble even telling them apart right now, telling which is which. So these are all the swatches from the palettes. On the top we have the Naked 3 palette, and on the bottom we have the Pure Cosmetics Buff Collection. The first one we have in the Naked palette is Strange, and that one is probably a little bit more pigmented, actually quite a bit more pigmented than the counterpart color in the Buff palette, but it is slightly chalkier, it kicked up a lot. So the second color we have in the Naked palette is Dust, and as you can see, the counterpart to that one is a slightly peachier color, but definitely just as pigmented, definitely just as shimmery and pretty, and very, very nice color. The third one we have is very, very similar. That is the Burnout color in the Naked palette, right here. And so that's Burnout, and this is the counterpart. And those are very, very similar colors. There's just maybe slightly more orange in the Buff palette. The next color, Limit, right here, is very, very chalky in the Naked 3 palette and a whole lot smoother in the Buff palette. The fifth color, Buzz, is really, really pretty in both tones. It's a little bit deeper and more rust colored in the Buff palette, but definitely still really, really pretty. Still really, really pigmented, not as much glitter as in the Naked palette. The next color we have is Trick, and that's this orange color right up here. And again, I think the main difference is the amount of glitter between the two shades, and I think you can tell that there's not as much glitter in the Buff collection than there is in the Naked palette. The next color is called Mooner, and that is a much nicer color in the Buff collection than it is in the Naked 3 palette. It's just a whole lot smoother, a lot easier to blend, and just nicer formulation in general. The next color is Liar, and that is pretty much an exact match. It's a really nice color, really nice formulation in both the Naked 3 and in the Buff collection palette. Very, very nice. The next color is Factory, and I actually like the Buff collection color better. I think it's a little deeper, a little bit richer, and a little bit more pigmented. The next color is Mugshot, and again, I think that's a really close match. I think I do like the Naked 3 swatch a little bit better because it has a little bit more reflect to it. The next one is Darkside, and that is a lot better formulation in the Buff palette than it is in the Naked palette. The Naked palette swatch is chalky and chunky, and the Buff palette swatch is a little more pigmented and solid. And that goes for the same in the last one that is called Blackheart in the Naked 3 palette. There is a lot better pigmentation in the Buff palette, and they have the same color glitter in it and everything. I just think overall the Buff palette color of Blackheart is better. So those are all of the swatches, and generally, I think it's a pretty good match. Another palette that I have that I think might be good as a dupe to the Naked 3 palette is the Rimmel Magnifyeyes shadow palette in the color London Nudes Calling. And I saw this at the drugstore recently and just had to pick it up because it looked so similar to the Naked 3 palette. So I wanted to test it out for you guys. Okay, so for the Magnifyeyes palette, as you can see, there are a lot more lighter shades than there are in this palette. There are a couple really good matches in this palette. It's not an exact match, but more of a general feel match of the palette. This shade is a pretty close match to this shade, and this shade is a pretty close match to that shade. So I think these two are just kind of shifted this way. I think they do have some really pretty lighter colors. There's really only one matte in this palette. This shade is really similar to this shade, and this shade is not really in this palette at all. The Rimmel Magnifyeyes palette is a really good alternative if you don't have the money to buy the Naked 3 palette or the Pure Cosmetics Buff palette, but it is really, really affordable. It's $10, less than $10. I think I got it for $8 or something. So if you're looking for something that has a similar feel, maybe you don't care so much about the mattes in the palette, then this one has a lot of the same core shades as the Naked 3 palette. Not an exact dupe, but there are some really, really close matches in here. So overall, you guys, dupes for the Naked 3. If you're looking for something that's cheaper, go with the Magnify shadow from Rimmel London because that has really good pigmentation for a drugstore shadow. Some very, very similar shades in there to the Naked 3, but it is not an exact match, but it is really, really close and a whole lot cheaper. This palette is one of the better drugstore eyeshadows I have used. Then we have the Buff collection. This is about the same price as the Naked 3 palette. They're both about 50 bucks. I would choose the Buff collection. I just like the pigmentation, the smoothness of these shadows more. That being said, these shadows don't tend to have as much glitter as these shadows. So if you're more of a glitzy, glittery person, you might want to go with the Naked 3, but if you're more about like the general shimmer and reflect, you might like these more. In general, the Buff collection shadows are a lot smoother, a lot nicer feeling, they feel a lot more blendable, and the Naked 3 tends to be a little bit chunkier, a little bit glitterier, and maybe a little bit shinier. So if I was going to choose one, I would probably choose the Pure Cosmetics Buff collection. So that's just my thoughts. If you love the Naked 3, that's totally cool. I'm not saying it's a bad palette. I think it's a great palette. I love the colors in it, but I think this one might be better. Thank you, BoxyCharm, for putting this in my BoxyCharm because I have a new love. If you guys like this video, make sure you give it a big huge thumbs up, and if you end up getting one of these palettes or have them, then let me know which one in the comments down below and let me know what you think of it. Do you like the Naked 3? Do you not like the Naked 3? What do you think about the pigmentation and the consistency of the colors related to other palettes in general? That sort of thing. And if you have not yet seen my lovely face before, hi, my name is Cassie. It's nice to meet you, and I would love for you to become friends with me on the internet. And the way you can do that is by scrolling down and hitting that red subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification button to get notifications every time I make a new video. And let me know in the comments down below if you guys want to see me do a tutorial using the Buff collection palette, because I'd love to do that for you guys. I think it's a pretty awesome palette and I want to play with it more. So you let me know. I don't know what that was. But anyways, that's pretty much it. I love you guys and I'll see you next time. Bye!